Olin and salutations to the Truth Core, whoever and wherever you may be on the planet. I'm here today, October 12th, 2021, to offer you some Gnostic intel, just a little taste of Gnostic intel about the star goddess in a dream body. That's a lovely little expression, if I may say so myself. And I can assure you that it's a unique expression that stands alone in the entire field of world mythology. And I'm talking about any mythologies that have ever existed and those that still exist today. Star goddess in a dream body is something you could use as a reminder, like you put a reminder on the door of your fridge, or you have a little notebook and you write in it a few words, get the lawnmower sharpened, just a little reminder. You could use it as a reminder of what reality really is, both in the concrete, immediate, sensory aspect, what you can see and touch and taste and smell and hear, but also in the transcendental aspect. Supernatural is not something in another dimension. The word dimension is quite tricky, and I use it carefully and sparingly. I do talk about dimensions. For instance, I've talked about the 9 dimensions of time, which emanate from eternity. And I've located the reality that is common to human animals today in the 4th dimension. And it's possible today, if you have the skill, the shamanic skill, and the intellectual sobriety, it's possible to reach the 5th and the 6th dimension. But beyond that, from the 7th dimension toward eternity, everything that you conceive to be human dissolves. And you can still be there. You can be as conscious as you are right now, but you would not be conscious in a human way. You would be conscious in a way that is aeonic and not human. The Aeons are not human. The Aeon Sophia is an animal, a living creature like a whale or a donkey. But she is not human, yet she is the designer mother of the human species, and we live in her womb, which is the biosphere of the earth. Yeah. I could go on and on, right? I have gone on and on. But right now, in this context, going on, let me take you back to that wonderful question. What's it to her? I cited a few examples of that, and I would be pleased if you would get on to the game. You see, asking that question is an exercise, and the exercise brings results. But the better results come from the practice that frames and supports that exercise. So, of course, any of you can ask that question. What are clouds to her? What are volcanoes to her? But the discovery of an answer, which is only a path into an endless experience of discovery, there's no final answer. That pathway into the rich and infinite discovery that opens when you turn the key with that question is something that demands discipline. So the better answers come if you practice the discipline that allows you to discover those answers and retain them. And that discipline is planetary tantra. And there is no other such discipline. To my knowledge, there may be similar or even complementary disciplines. I really don't know. But what I do know is that planetary tantra, being the expression of the living gnosis today, is a stand-alone act. And even if there are other practices and approaches, say, to nature, that you could mix and match with planetary tantra, I don't advise that. Because in fact, you don't need to do that. The complete expression of knowledge can be found in the path of planetary tantra. I mean, the complete expression of the knowledge of the actions and activities of the planetary animal mother. So let's get back to her and let's ask, what's it to her? Rain. What's rain to her? Well, rain is joy and grief. And you know that because you can shed tears of joy and tears of grief, can't you? And as a matter of fact, those are the two physiological expressions of your body that you undergo in the most intense experiences of your life. You may laugh and cry. You may feel sorrow about something to various degrees in the course of your life. But when you deeply sob with grief and cry, and deeply throb with joy and cry, that is similar to what rain is to her. It's not a symbol of her joy and grief. It is her joy and grief. When you feel rain on your face, you are feeling materially the emotions of joy and grief felt by the planetary animal mother. By the way, there may be a little reverb in this recording. I'm playing around with different settings to get the best recording possible, but it's a pain in the arse. Maybe I'll find a solution. Fire. What is fire to her? Well, place yourself on a porch of a beautiful house in the country. And maybe there's a pond in the distance and a willow tree over the pond, and then there are mountains. You're looking out at the natural environment, and you're sitting there, and say you're sitting there in a rocking chair, and you're rocking slowly back and forth, like a clock, like a pendulum. Tick, tock, tick, tock. And as you sit there calmly, serenely, rocking, absorbing everything that is around you, contemplating it in its totality, you feel something that might be called the passage of time. You see the passage of time in the angle of the sun, in the way the light plays on the fields. You know that time is passing. You know that the day is proceeding, is progressing. And so time goes. You have the experience, time is going. Did you ever wonder where it comes from in the first place? Anyway, that's another talk. So, there you are, and I'm saying, imagine that you totally absorb yourself in the feeling of time. It's paradoxical, because in a way it stands still and doesn't move. The moment hovers always. This moment is eternity. But in another way it moves, as fire does. Fire stands still. Look at fire. Look at the flame in a fireplace. Do you notice how it stands still, but then it moves at the same time? Fire is her sense of time. That's a big one. There's a unit on planetary tantra it's in Gaian alchemy, and it describes what her senses are. It describes the 5 senses of the Aeons of fire. Now, you have, say, the sense of hearing. So you have an organ of hearing, which is your ears, and the inner mechanism of the cochlea, and the whole mysterious way that you hear. So you have an organ of hearing, and you have sound impressions that you register through that organ. Can you make a straightforward comparison to the senses of the planetary animal mother? Does she have an organ of hearing? Does she have an organ of smell? This again is an exercise. It's a deep contemplation. It's not a meditation that you use whereby you go into some state all by yourself, staring at your belly button and entering into some kind of state of serenity or mental quietude. No, it's an active contemplation. It's full of content. It's rich and deep, and you can never go deep enough. What is her sense of smell, her olfactory sense? Does she have an organ of smell? Does she have something like a nose? No, the analogy won't work that way. But it is possible to say that her sense of smell is a phenomenon present in the biosphere. And what is it? It's the phenomenon of putrefaction. Now, if you look at nature, you see that a lot of the processes of nature are benevolent processes of rotting and putrefaction. You know what a beautiful handful of compost smells like. You know what rotting vegetables smell like. Swamps. So we smell putrefaction. But for the Aeons of fire, putrefaction is her sense of smell. That activity, which is profoundly important to the support and regeneration of all forms of life, especially on the microbial level, that activity in the entire planet, in the biosphere of putrefaction, is how she smells. Isn't that odd? Because it's a double entendre, it works both ways. You smell putrefaction, it's a sense impression. But to her, putrefaction is her sense of smell. How about one more? I can only give you a hint of this. What's permanganate to her? You see, it gets really precise, really exact. The living gnosis today is not only noetic psychology, but it is noetic biology. It is noetic atmospheric physics. And that's no trope that I invented. Have you ever heard of the noosphere? The meme of the noosphere was really big in the 60s and 70s, and it came into discussion and became quite trendy at the same time that Gaia theory was emerging. So various people proposed that the atmospheric envelope of the Earth was the noosphere. It was an immense active neural living network, which it is. But that's really quite a gross characterization of what it is. It doesn't go into the fine points of participation, how you can know what she's doing, and how you can prove that you know it. This is what it's all about. So what is permanganate to her? Well, when you look at the horrific deceit, the covert deception, and the vile and sadistic crimes that are being committed today, you find that the perpetrators use various, what shall I say, they use concepts to support their criminal activity. So the concept of a virus, the concept of carbon dioxide being a toxin, you see? And so there is the scam of global warming. Okay? And what you are told, first of all, you're told several lies. There are several lies packed into the global warming scam concept. They pitch these lies to you in the form of a concept, and they rely on the chance that most people will not be intelligent enough to investigate the matter and see that it is a lie. So the global warming scam, I suppose I can talk about this. I was wondering lately what I can talk about that won't be removed because it goes against the official narrative. But I'll take a chance. It relies on the lie that carbon dioxide, which we breathe out and trees breathe in, is toxic. It also relies on the lie that global warming, the raising of the temperature of the earth, is driven by human activity, such as the discharge of certain chemicals into the air since the Industrial Revolution. But an honest study of history and the geological record going back not too far proves that to be completely untrue. Why is Greenland called Greenland? Because at one time it was green. And Vinland, why is it called Vineland? Because it was a land where grapes grew. And how did that happen? That those areas which are now largely cold, covered by a glacier, most of Greenland is covered by a glacier. How did that happen? Because she naturally warmed the atmosphere in cooperation with the sun, because the sun drives the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. That is the scientific truth. And so when there is more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, everything grows luxuriously, you see? So you could say that the truth behind global warming is that the Aeons Sophia is modifying her own planetary metabolism so that there can be luxuriant growth, which affords better conditions of life for the inhabitants of the planet, not just humans, but all other animals. So she's pushing toward that goal. And at the same time, she's doing something else, which you could call a secret transmutation. She's performing an intimate and secret transmutation. And this process has been crudely described by geologists and scientists as an extinction process. So what they teach is that there were previously, I think, 5 extinctions. And there were moments when Gaia extincted up to 95 or more % of all the surface and animate life on the planet, but not the microbial life and not the anaerobic life beneath the surface of the earth. She didn't extinct the anaerobic domains. And so extinction is her pleasure. She does it at her pleasure. It's like an artist painting a vast canvas. She paints it to her satisfaction, and then one day she decides, I want to paint another one. And she just wipes that canvas out for a while and starts a new canvas. She's starting a new canvas. And there are processes, there are developments in the biosphere and in the intimate realm of animal biology and human genetics, which are deeply hidden. And she is currently, as I speak, making profound changes at that hidden level. And one of the agents, the prime agent that she uses to do that, is permanganate. Permanganate is her secret tool of extinction. But when I say extinction, it's not what you think it is. You see, extinction to her means renewal. So to us, it may look like extinction, and it's true that there's a great die-off of species. You can't blame it entirely on the human animal to some degree. You know, it's wrong to blame it totally on the human animal, the extinction of other species, but it's fair and correct to some degree to blame it on human beings. But in the big picture, she's in charge of extinction, and she's in charge of the regeneration of all species. That is what the Cambrian explosion was all about. 585 million years ago, according to the accepted geological timescale. Go read about the Cambrian explosion. When I was recovering and restoring the Fallen Goddess scenario, which is the biography of the earth and the story of the creation of the human species, the design of the anthropos, there are 9 episodes. I eventually arrived at a scheme, a scenario of 9 episodes. And the last sentence of the 9th episode is, "And then came the explosion." So the 9 episodes of the home story lead up into the point. They describe everything that occurred to Sophia and with Sophia up to the threshold moment of the Cambrian explosion. So what I did there was a neat trick, I think, wherein from episode 9 onward, you can graft the Fallen Goddess scenario on the current geological record, the scenario that geologists and paleontologists have created. It's just a story, it's just a narrative, but it's a useful narrative, and it connects directly to the sequence of events in the Fallen Goddess scenario. How lovely is that? So back to Permanganate, and I'll say a few closing words on that subject. Something happened in January of 2016. What happened in the sky is that the planet Saturn reached Antares, which is a bright star in the heart of the constellation of the Scorpion. And at the same time, Venus was there, and they were conjunct. And this celestial event of Venus conjunct Saturn at the heart of the Scorpion signaled the moment when the Aeons Sophia implemented what is called her extinction protocols. So her extinction protocols are underway, and those mysterious activities are behind what climate change really is on her terms. If you want to know what it is on her terms, you need to go and explore this mystery. This mystery is under the command of the one we call Scorpion Mother. And in fact, you could say, as a trope, as a provisional approach to learning something, you could say that Permanganate is the venom of the Scorpion Mother. Now, in order to understand the large-scale biospheric transmutations that are now taking place on her terms, you have to factor in methane. The release of methane from the melting tundra in Russia and in Siberia is a huge factor in her program of self-transformation. She is undergoing a massive metamorphosis of her own body and of her own consciousness and all the elements that compose what she is. You see? And there is an interaction. You can go investigate it between the release of methane, both from below ground and under the seafloor, and the activation of permanganate, because it converts methane. That is the key. It's not just that methane is being released. She is releasing methane to achieve her purposes, but she is using permanganate within that release in a precise and mysterious way. So permanganate converts methyl groups to carboxyl groups. And that is the key to her process of extinction. But the extinction is actually a means to an end. Extinction is not the end. It is simply a means to an end. And the end, the ultimate end of what she's doing, is the transmutation of Anthropos 10 to Anthropos 11. So yes, you can assume plausibly, and you can go on to investigate it, that the central purpose of the changes she is making in the earth take into consideration the primary subject of this experiment for her. And the primary subject of it is the anthropos, the human species. Complex and dazzling subject, permanganate. But I'll leave it at that for the moment, and I'll take the rest of this talk to come around to that lovely phrase, star goddess in a dream body. The investigation and participation in the magnificent wonders of the Mother Source requires developing knowledge, precise knowledge, and developing the right syntax, the language that fits the phenomena, including the phenomenon of your interaction with everything that she does. And there are various angles to approach and develop this investigation. You don't just work it from one angle. You could say, I think it's fair to say, that I use consistently 3 tropes. First trope is, I talk about the mother planet and the Aeons of fire as if it is a woman, a female animal. Now, this approach to nature has been condemned due to scientific materialism and reductionism, which is pure ignorance disguised as bullshit. It's called the pathetic fallacy. Pathetic fallacy means to falsely attribute human-like emotions to nature. So when I say the rain is her joy and grief, I'm demonstrating the pathetic fallacy. It's also called anthropomorphism. But you see, anthropomorphism and the trope of the female mother animal is simply that. It's simply a trope, a tool for investigation. It's not absolutely and literally correct, and it's not incorrect. The value or the correctness of it depends on what you get out of it, what you learn from using that trope. So I take that approach, and in Planetary Tantra we use that approach extensively. And we talk about the planetary animal mother anthropomorphically, but we always know that she is not in human form. But since what we do know about the experience of being alive comes from being in human form, then obviously we use what we know in that framework in order to investigate what we don't know. And everything depends on how you use it. You can use the anthropomorphic trope badly, and you can use it brilliantly. It's an art. Do you want to learn how to do that? So you'll find, if you go and investigate Planetary Tantra, which, by the way, is totally free on Nemata, you don't have to be a member who supports Nemata by donations, and there's a forum. If you want to learn about Planetary Tantra, you'll find that Shaktas, is to say those who revere and love the power and presence of the planetary animal mother, Pam, use this trope. So they talk about the Dakinis as frequencies of the mother, and they talk about the mother, I talk about the mother, as having human-like attributes and human-like emotions and thoughts and reactions. And fair enough, as long as you know that it's a tool that you're using. And as long as you can acquire genuine knowledge with that tool. Now, another approach I take could be called the analogy of the body. So what does the body of the planetary animal mother look like? You see? Obviously, as far as I know, it doesn't have a head or arms or legs. So what does it look like? What does it resemble? Does it resemble a coiled serpent? Perhaps the magnetic fields of the earth. You've seen the CGI-generated images of the magnetic currents of the earth. Perhaps all those are simply lines and colors and markings on the body of an immense coiled serpent, Mahakundala, the great Kundalini, which is the serpent power of the earth itself. Does she have a snake body? Well, all through history in every culture, the animistic peoples, and animism is the default setting for the human mind, have seen her that way. Yeah, they have worshipped the goddess as a great serpent. You see? But I carry the body analogy further, don't I? For instance, I talk about the physiological processes of the human body, and I compare them to geophysical and biospheric processes, right? But how far can you go with that? Well, that's an analogy that you have to work really carefully. For instance, I would say you can't really use that analogy correctly if you think that the Aeons of Fire has a spleen. What is her spleen? Or if you say, what's it to her? And then something comes up. Oh, that's her spleen. That doesn't work very well at all. In some respects, the body analog produces intel. It produces insights and discoveries that you can then explore more deeply. And in other cases, it doesn't work, so you don't use it where it doesn't work. So I have never said that the superorganism of the earth has kidneys, stomach, liver, heart. I've never said that because I've found over the years that using that analog in that way as a tool is not productive of genuine intel. Follow me? The process of developing living Gnostic intel today, which has nothing to do with the study by religious scholars of Gnosticism in the past, or the pathetic remains of Gnosticism. It's light years beyond that. The study requires a really close examination of the language he used to describe her so that it becomes better and better. And sometimes I make mistakes. For instance, I want to correct something I said in the previous talk in Naked Metaphysics. I said that you have chromosomal DNA, that is to say, the minute amount out of the total human genome that is coded into your chromosomal genes. And that's nucleic DNA, and it's in the nucleus of each cell of your body. But then I made a mistake. I didn't speak precisely. I believe I said that you have genes which are not in the nucleus. You have non-chromosomal genes which are not in the nucleus. That's not exactly correct. What you have is DNA that is not in the nuclear genes. It's called cytoplasmic DNA. And this presence of this cytoplasmic DNA, which is in your cell, in every cell, but not in the nucleus where the chromosomes are packed, which give you your genealogical identity, is extremely fascinating and very little understood. Now, I had the opportunity when I went to the Marian Institute for a talk in 2006 to meet Lynn Margulis, and I met her later also when she came here to Spain. Now, Lynn Margulis is considered in some respect to be the mother of Gaia theory, along with James Lovelock, was the father of Gaia theory. So Lynn Margulis is an evolutionary biologist from the United States and who was married to Carl Sagan, is known for that accomplishment. But she's also known for something else, which I consider to be equally or even more remarkable. In her book called Slanted Truths, she describes how when she was in college learning the Darwinian dogma, as she calls it, the Darwinian dogma of evolution and of the primacy of the nucleic DNA, she couldn't concentrate on what the professor was saying. And so the professor was doing a PowerPoint talk, and on the big screen there was an image of the human cell. And he was going on and on and on about how the DNA, RNA coded into the nucleus drives everything. It's like the god of the genetic system. And she wasn't interested in that. She was autistic, by the way. And she couldn't keep her attention on that. And she kept looking offside at the rest of the cell within the cellular membrane. And there she noticed, well, wait, there is also DNA outside the nucleus. It's called cytoplasmic DNA. Well, what on earth is that doing there, floating around in the cytoplasm? Cytoplasm is a word that you hardly ever hear anymore. But she developed an entire new theory based on her observation of the presence of DNA in the cytoplasm. And it's called set theory, which means serial endosymbiosis, SE. So serial endosymbiosis theory, SET, is something that exists today in the scientific world that came uniquely out of the mind of Lynn Margulis, who was autistic. It is a creation of an autistic mind, like some other things you might have encountered here and there on the internet. Anyway, I digress. I just wanted to point that out in order to correct my statement. There are not genes as such outside the nucleus of the cell, as far as I know. But what are precious stones? Like sapphire, ruby, moonstone, tourmaline, quartz. all these precious crystals are the chromosomal genes in the body of the planetary animal mother. Now let's talk about the body. When I was at that conference in Marion, I gave a talk, then Margulis spoke, I spoke, or I should say, I spoke. And what did I speak about? Well, I spoke about Gaia theory and my book, which came out at that time. It was in November of 2006. And this is how I ended my talk. I said, there are many things that you can think about or contemplate when you bring your attention to the Aeons of fire, who is embodied in the earth. But one thing that might be good to consider is that she's sort of like Marilyn Monroe. She has a great body, but she wants to be loved for her mind. And that was true of Marilyn Monroe, by the way. I can't mention Marilyn without adding a little note on the horrors committed upon her by the Albanians in Hollywood, the way that they corrupted her, trashed her beauty and her sexuality, and eventually murdered her. And I suppose you could say that's what the Albanians think they can do to Mother Earth, but they can't. They can't. It's simply the measure of the megalomania, of their psychopathy, and their sick lust for power that leads them to believe that they can even begin in any way to permanently and fundamentally damage the fabric of life. So, bringing this talk around to the end, I will point out the third trope or tool of investigation, and that is exactly the trope of the dream body. This is a fascinating concept, and it's something that those who enter planetary tantra learn, and the deepening of that learning never stops. So what the learning begins, the whole process of learning and investigation happens in the framework of the home story, the fallen goddess scenario. So what does the story say about how Sophia turned into the earth? Well, it says, yes, indeed, she is embodied in the earth, but not embodied in the way that you are embodied in your physical body right now. So wherever you are in your physical body, you may be sitting out in the park, you may be listening to me while you're taking a walk, you might be taking a bath, you might be eating a sandwich, you might be having a glass of wine, and I toast to your health. Or you might just be sitting in a chair. You are in your physical body sitting in a chair. But you know what it is to dream, don't you? Dreaming is a reality of the human animal. It is a phenomenon of human experience. It's not an illusion, not an illusion. So, when you dream, you have a dream body. And this subject of the dream body and how dreams work and REM dreaming and lucid dreaming is a tremendous facet or field of noetic psychology, and it interfaces in certain ways with gnosis. So you know that the body you have when you're doing something in a dream is not the same as the body you have when you're awake in your physical body. The planet is the dream body of the Aeons of fire. It is not correct to compare it to a physical body. For instance, if you approach her with this concept. She is a spirit of some kind, a goddess, a spirit, and she is embodied in matter, spirit embodied in matter. That is completely incorrect. And in fact, the whole dichotomy of spirit and matter is wrong, syntactically twisted, and useless. It will not get you to the real truth about the earth and the cosmos. Spirit, matter, spirit implying, as I've said, something that is immaterial. Nothing is immaterial. The materiality of the earth, the trees, the rocks, the rivers, the mountains, the earth into the depth, into the core, into the heights of the Himalayas, the clouds, it is all material, and that material is the substance of her dreaming body. You have the opportunity, through your senses, to contact Sophia, to know her, and interact with her as if the sensorial world was her physical body. But actually, it isn't. To you, it's her physical body, but to her, it's her dream body. She is dreaming the earth. She is dreaming your life. You do not have a life of your own. The only true life you have is the life you find in her dream, and the role you play in her dream, which is a role that you discover, define, and script for yourself. Now, of course, this picture that I'm presenting here begs the question, well, John, that's how they say my name in Maine, by the way, Jawn, Maine accent. Wouldn't it be possible for an Aeon, one of these massive serpentine plasmic entities from the galactic core, to actually embody itself and assume the material body of a planet or any other kind of material body? See? Wouldn't that be possible? Well, I don't know. I wouldn't rule it out, but I'll tell you that it ain't what's happening here. That's for sure. And if you can't see what's happening here within the specific and exact conditions of cosmic manifestation, then why do you speculate and wonder about how anything else could be? Don't waste your time, don't trash your mind, and don't run your imagination into a rut by going on that route. Stay with the beautiful gem, star goddess in a dream body. You can get to the core of knowing her in that way. Also, when you think of her as having a dream body, you can incorporate the idea that it is a shape-shifting dream body. So you might appear in a dream pretty much as you appear now. Your dream body might be a replica of your physical body with the same hair, same weight, the same color of the eyes. But you could also appear in a dream as an animal or a tree. So she has a shape-shifting dream body. And that's why, one of the reasons why, it is pointless to argue about what is the shape of the earth. I pointed out years ago that calling her Pam, which is a term of affection, like you use for an animal that you love, you have pet names. Pam is a pet name for Gaia Sophia. It means planetary animal mother. But it can also mean planetary amoebic mass. And there's a good argument, which we are developing in planetary tantra, for the possibility that the shape of the earth is a massive amoeba, an amoebic mass, you see? And in that case, it could appear as round, it could appear as flat, it could appear in various ways. When it comes to this question of what is the shape of the earth, how did anyone know? How did anyone determine in ancient times what the shape of the earth was? For instance, how did the Egyptians, who constructed the pyramid and aligned it to the constellation of Draco and other stars in Orion and Sirius, and placed it exactly at that point in the earth, which is the center of mass of the earth. In other words, if you run a north-south line from the Great Pyramid and an east-west line, those two lines cover the greatest landmass area of the earth. It's a unique point on the earth. How did they know that? How did they know to position the pyramid there and to model the dimensions of the pyramid on a modular system that repeats the shape and size of the earth as well as the orbit of the moon? How did they know that? So it's a big mystery how anyone ever figured out what the shape of the earth is. But there is no single and conclusive answer to that, you see, because the earth is her dream body, and it morphs through space and time. She is a sky dancer who shapeshifts as she dances, and that is her pleasure. And enough said. I'll be seeing you in the beauty to come.